This pilot just humiliated a 15-year-old girl in front of 200 passengers. He's smirking. He thinks he won. But he has no idea who her father is. In 23 minutes, his career is over. In 3 hours, the entire airline is grounded. This actually happened. And it gets worse for him. I said, "Get off my plane." The voice belonged to Captain Kyle Sanders, and it echoed through the cabin like thunder. He stood at the front of the airplane, his pilot uniform perfectly pressed, his face red with anger. His finger pointed straight at Grace like a weapon. Grace was only 15 years old. She wore her school jacket from Baltimore Academy, her backpack still on her lap. Her eyes were wet with tears, but she refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not in front of all these people." "Sir, please," the flight attendant, a kind woman named Rebecca, tried to speak. "She's just a child. She hasn't done anything wrong." "I don't care." Kyle Sanders cut her off. "I'm the captain of this aircraft, and I decide who flies and who doesn't. That girl is not getting on my plane." Security. 2 security guards appeared at the airplane door. The entire cabin went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Grace's lips trembled. But I have a ticket," she whispered. "I'm going home to see my dad. It's his birthday." Kyle Sanders laughed, a cold, mean laugh that made Grace feel small. "I don't care whose birthday it is. You people always cause trouble. Always complaining, always making scenes. Well, not on MY watch. Not on MY plane." An older woman in seat 11B gasped. "Did he just say, you people? Oh my lord. This is disgraceful," a man in a business suit shouted from the back. "She's a child." But Kyle Sanders didn't care. He crossed his arms and stood like a wall. "Either she leaves, or I don't fly this plane. And if I don't fly, none of you get to Maryland today. So what's it gonna be?" Rebecca the flight attendant knelt beside Grace. Her eyes were kind, but her voice was helpless. "Sweetie, I'm so sorry. I don't agree with this, but..." "It's okay," Grace whispered, even though it wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. She stood up on shaky legs, grabbed her backpack, and walked down the aisle. Every step felt like walking through mud. People stared. Some looked angry. Some looked sad. But nobody did anything. Nobody stood up. Nobody said, "No, this is wrong." Grace reached the airplane door. She turned back one last time and looked at Kyle Sanders. He smirked at her, actually smirked, like he'd won some kind of game. "Have a nice day," he said with fake sweetness. Grace walked off the plane and into the jetway. Behind her, she heard the door seal shut. Through the window, she watched the airplane pull away from the gate, carrying 200 people who had watched her get humiliated and done nothing. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. She had to call her dad. She had to tell him what happened. But Grace didn't know, couldn't have known, that this phone call would change everything. Her father, Michael Morgan, answered on the first ring. "Gracie? Baby girl, where are you? Your flight should have taken off by now." Grace tried to speak, but her voice broke. The tears she'd been holding back finally came. "Daddy," she sobbed. "Daddy, they kicked me off the plane. The pilot said, he said people like me always cause trouble. He wouldn't let me fly, Daddy. Everyone just watched. Everyone just watched." On the other end of the phone, there was nothing but silence. But it wasn't the silence of someone who didn't know what to say. It was the silence of a storm about to break. When Michael Morgan finally spoke, his voice was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before an earthquake. "What airline, Grace?" "Sky High Airlines. Flight 447. "What was the pilot's name?" "Captain Kyle Sanders." "Daddy, I'm so sorry, I just wanted to come home for your birthday." "Grace, listen to me very carefully." Her father's voice was steady now, but there was something in it that Grace had never heard before. Something powerful. Something unstoppable. "Go to the airport lounge. Order whatever you want. I'm going to make a phone call." And Grace? "Yes, Daddy? That pilot? He just made the biggest mistake of his entire life." The phone call ended. Grace stood in the empty jetway, confused. What did her father mean? He worked for some company, she knew he had an important job, but he never really talked about it. He was always just Dad. The man who made her pancakes on Sunday mornings and helped her with math homework. What she didn't know was that Michael Morgan wasn't just some businessman. He was the CEO of Transglobal Holdings, the company that owned Sky High Airlines. And in exactly 23 minutes, Captain Kyle Sanders was going to discover that the troublemaking black teenager he'd just thrown off his plane was the daughter of the man who signed his paychecks. But that wasn't even the worst part, because Michael Morgan didn't just own Sky High Airlines. He owned 12 airlines. And what was about to happen next would make the news for weeks. It would trend on every social media platform. It would spark conversations in every corner of the country. But right now, at this moment, Captain Kyle Sanders sat in the cockpit of Flight 447, smiling to himself as he prepared for takeoff. He had no idea that the airplane he was about to fly would never reach its destination. He had no idea that in less than an hour, his career would be over. And he definitely had no idea that the powerful man he'd spent years trying to impress, the mysterious CEO of Trans Global Holdings who rarely appeared in public, was the father of the girl he'd just humiliated. The airplane's engines roared to life. In the terminal, Grace wiped her tears and walked toward the airport lounge, still confused about her father's strange reaction. And somewhere in a downtown Baltimore office building, Michael Morgan picked up his phone and made a call that would shake the entire aviation industry. "Get me the head of Sky High Airlines operations. Now. And ground Flight 447. I don't care if it's already taxiing. Ground it. Nobody on that plane goes anywhere until I say so." "Sir," his assistant's voice was confused. "Ground an entire flight? But sir, that's... Do it. Now. And get me the full crew roster. Especially the captain. I want to know everything about Captain Kyle Sanders. Where he lives, where he went to school, every single complaint ever filed against him. I want it all on my desk in 10 minutes. Right away, Mr. Morgan." Michael Morgan stood and walked to his office window. From the 47th floor, he could see the entire city of Baltimore spread out below him. Somewhere out there, his daughter was crying in an airport, humiliated and hurt. His hands clenched into fists. "You picked the wrong child," he whispered to the window. "And you picked the wrong father." At that exact moment, Flight 447 was third in line for takeoff. Captain Kyle Sanders was whistling, happy with himself. In the cabin, passengers were settling in, some feeling guilty about what they'd witnessed, others already forgetting about the teenage girl. Then Kyle's radio crackled to life. "Flight 447, this is ground control. You are ordered to return to the gate immediately. Do not, I repeat, do not take off. Return to gate B-17. This is not a request." Kyle frowned. "Ground control, this is Flight 447. What's the problem? We're cleared for takeoff." "Negative, Flight 447. You have been grounded by order of Trans Global Holdings Executive Command. Return to the gate. Now." Kyle's face went white. Trans Global Holdings. The parent company. The people who owned everything. But why? In the cabin, passengers groaned as the airplane turned around, heading back to the gate instead of toward the runway. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kyle's voice came over the intercom, shaky now, confused. "We're experiencing a minor technical issue. We'll be returning to the gate briefly." But it wasn't a technical issue. And it wouldn't be brief. Because at that exact moment, Michael Morgan was walking out of his office, his face carved from stone, heading toward the airport. And Captain Kyle Sanders, who thought he'd won, who thought he'd put a troublemaker in her place, was about to learn what real power looked like. The plane doors opened again at gate B-17. And this time, it wasn't a teenage girl leaving. This time, everyone was about to discover the truth. And the truth was going to ground more than just one flight. If Captain Kyle Sanders represents everything wrong with how people abuse power, hit that like button right now. Don't stay silent. Subscribe if you believe no child should ever be treated this way. Let's build a community that stands against discrimination. Share this story if you think this message needs to reach every corner of the internet. Silence protects bullies. Don't be silent. Drop a comment. Have you or someone you know ever been discriminated against? What happened? Your story matters. Tell us below. Michael Morgan's black car moved through Baltimore traffic like a shark through water. Fast. Focused. Unstoppable. In the back seat, he made phone calls. Lots of them. "Hello, this is Michael Morgan." "Yes, the Michael Morgan. I need to speak with your manager. Now. I don't care if he's in a meeting. Get him out? You have 30 seconds, or your entire department gets restructured today." His assistant, Jennifer Park, sat across from him, her laptop open, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She'd worked for Michael for 8 years, and she'd never seen him like this. His face was calm, but his eyes looked like they could burn holes through steel. "Sir, I have the information you requested," Jennifer said, her voice shaky. "Captain Kyle Sanders, age 42. He's been with Sky High Airlines for 15 years. And sir, there's something you need to see." She turned the laptop toward him. On the screen were complaint reports. Lots of them. 3 passengers filed complaints against Sanders in the past 2 years, Jennifer explained. All 3 were passengers of color. One claimed Sanders made them move seats for safety reasons that made no sense. Another said Sanders delayed takeoff to have a Middle Eastern passenger's bags searched 3 times. The third complaint was from last month. A Hispanic family said Sanders announced over the intercom that some people need to learn airplane etiquette while staring directly at them. Michael's jaw clenched. And what did the airline do about these complaints? Jennifer looked down. Nothing, sir. All 3 complaints were closed without investigation. Sanders received a verbal warning for one of them, but that's it. Who closed the investigations? David Fletcher, sir. The vice president of flight operations at Sky High. Michael's eyes went cold. Add Fletcher's name to the list. I want him in my office tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. sharp. Yes, sir. The car pulled up to Baltimore-Washington International Airport. Michael didn't wait for the driver to open his door. He was already out, already moving. People in the terminal saw him and stopped. Michael Morgan was famous in the business world, but he rarely appeared in public. He was like a ghost. Everyone knew his name, but almost nobody knew his face. Until today. Back at Gate B-17, Flight 447 was in chaos. Passengers were angry. They'd been sitting on the plane for 45 minutes now, going nowhere. The airplane doors were still closed, but they hadn't moved an inch. What is going on? A woman in seat 15C demanded. I have a connection to catch. This is ridiculous, a man shouted. We were about to take off. Captain Kyle Sanders stood in the cockpit, his confidence from earlier completely gone. He'd been on the phone with his supervisor for 20 minutes, and nothing made sense. I don't understand, Kyle said into the phone. What do you mean the flight is grounded indefinitely? We have clearance. The plane is fine. Everything checks out. Sanders, listen to me very carefully. His supervisor's voice sounded scared. Actually scared. You need to think very hard about what you did before this flight. Did you have an incident? Did you remove a passenger? Kyle's stomach dropped. There was a teenage girl. She looked like trouble, so You what? Kyle had never heard his supervisor yell before. I used my authority as captain to remove a potentially disruptive passenger. It's my right under. Potentially disruptive? Potentially? Sanders, what did this girl actually do? Well, nothing yet, but. Nothing? She did nothing, and you kicked her off the plane? Look, I know her type. They always cause problems. I was being proactive. Her type? Sanders, do you realize what you've done? The cockpit door burst open. A man in an airport security uniform stood there, but he didn't look like regular security. He looked like Secret Service. Behind him were 3 more just like him. Captain Kyle Sanders, the man said. Yes? You need to come with us. Right now. What? Why? What's happening? Sir, the CEO of Trans Global Holdings is in the terminal. He's requested your immediate presence. And sir? If I were you, I'd start praying. Kyle's face went white as a sheet. The CEO? But why would the CEO care about one passenger complaint? I don't understand. You removed his daughter from your flight. The world stopped. Kyle couldn't breathe. His ears were ringing. What? Grace Morgan. The girl you kicked off this plane. She's Michael Morgan's daughter. The man who owns this airline. The man who owns 12 airlines. And Captain Sanders? He's here. Right now. And he wants to talk to you. Kyle's legs felt like jelly. No. This couldn't be happening. The girl was just some kid. Some random teenager. She wasn't. But she was. And Kyle Sanders had just made the worst mistake of his entire life. In the airport lounge, Grace sat with a hot chocolate she hadn't touched. Her eyes were still red from crying. An airport manager had come to her 20 minutes ago, very polite, very apologetic, asking her to please wait in the premium lounge as a guest of the airline. Grace didn't understand what was happening. Then she saw him. Her father walked into the lounge like a king walking into his castle. He wasn't running. He wasn't rushing. But every person in that lounge turned to look at him. Something about the way he moved made everyone pay attention. Daddy. Grace jumped up and ran to him. Michael caught his daughter in his arms and held her tight. For a moment, the powerful CEO disappeared, and he was just a father hugging his little girl. Are you okay? He whispered into her hair. Did anyone hurt you? I'm okay, Grace sniffled. Just embarrassed. Daddy, I don't understand what's happening. Why did they bring me to this fancy lounge? The manager was so nice, but he seemed nervous. Grace, honey, we need to talk. Michael pulled back and looked at his daughter. There's something I never told you about my job. You work for some company, right? Trans Global something? Trans Global Holdings. And I don't just work for them, baby girl. I own them. I'm the CEO. Grace blinked. CEO means boss, right? Yes. It means I'm the boss of the whole company. Oh. That's nice, Daddy. Michael almost smiled. His daughter had no idea. Grace, Transglobal Holdings owns a lot of businesses. Hotels, restaurants, office buildings. And we also own airlines. 12 airlines. That's a lot of airplanes. Yes, it is. And one of those airlines is called Sky High Airlines. Grace froze. Her eyes went wide. Wait. You own the airline that just kicked me off? Yes. So that means? That means the pilot who humiliated you works for me. And Grace, what he did to you? He's done it to other people too. I just found out. He's been treating passengers badly for years, and nobody stopped him. Grace's hands started shaking. Not from fear this time. From anger. Other people? He did this to other people? Yes. And it ends today. At that exact moment, Kyle Sanders was being escorted through the terminal. His uniform that had looked so sharp and proud earlier now looked like a costume. He was sweating. His hands were shaking. The security guards brought him to a private conference room near the gates. Michael Morgan stood inside, his back to the door, looking out the window at the airplanes. Mr. Morgan, sir, one of the guards said. Captain Sanders is here. Leave us, Michael said quietly. The guards left. The door closed. Kyle and Michael were alone. Kyle tried to speak. Mr. Morgan, sir, I had no idea that girl was your daughter. If I had known. Michael turned around slowly. His face was calm. Too calm. If you had known she was my daughter, you would have treated her differently? Yes, sir, of course I would have. So you admit you treat people differently based on who their parents are? Kyle's mouth opened and closed like a fish. That's not. I didn't mean it like that. Let me ask you something, Captain Sanders. Michael took a step forward. My daughter was sitting in her seat. She had a valid ticket. She wasn't causing any problems. Can you tell me, and be very specific, what made you decide to remove her from your flight? Kyle stammered. I had a feeling, sir. An instinct. You develop these instincts after years of flying. An instinct? Based on what? Based on my experience. With what? With 15-year-old girls wearing school jackets? With teenagers carrying textbooks? What exactly about my daughter made you feel she was going to cause trouble? The silence was deafening. Michael continued, his voice sharp as a knife. I have the complaint reports right here, Captain Sanders. 3 other passengers. All of them had one thing in common. Can you guess what it was? Kyle's face was pale. Sir, they weren't white. Michael's words cut through the air. Every single passenger you've had problems with just happened to be black, Hispanic, or Middle Eastern. Quite a coincidence, isn't it? Mr. Morgan, please, I can explain. Explain? You're going to explain why you threw my daughter off a plane because of the color of her skin. I didn't. Kyle stopped himself, but it was too late. Michael raised an eyebrow. You didn't? Then tell me, Captain Sanders. Tell me exactly why you removed her. Kyle's mouth opened, but no words came out. Because there was no good answer. There was no right thing to say. He'd been caught, and he knew it. That's what I thought, Michael said coldly. You're fired. Effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. You'll receive information about collecting your belongings by mail. Don't bother coming back to this airport. Please. Kyle's voice cracked. Please, Mr. Morgan, I have a family. I have a mortgage. Flying is all I know. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. You made many mistakes. For years. And nobody stopped you because nobody with power saw what you were doing. Until today. Until you made the mistake of hurting my daughter. Kyle fell to his knees. Actually fell to his knees. Please. Please, I'm begging you. I'll do anything. I'll apologize to your daughter. I'll take sensitivity training. You'll do nothing. You're done. Michael pressed a button on the wall, and the security guards came back in. Get him out of here. As the guards pulled Kyle to his feet, Michael added one more thing. And Captain Sanders? My daughter's name is Grace. Not that girl. Not you people. Her name is Grace Morgan, and you will remember it for the rest of your life. Kyle was dragged from the room, still pleading, still begging. Michael stood alone in the conference room, his hands clenched into fists. He wanted to feel satisfied. He wanted to feel like justice had been served. But all he felt was anger. Because firing one pilot wasn't enough. How many others were there like Kyle Sanders? How many passengers had been humiliated and had nowhere to turn? How many complaints had been swept under the rug? Michael pulled out his phone and made another call. Jennifer, I want an immediate review of every pilot, every flight attendant, and every manager at Sky High Airlines. Every complaint filed in the last 5 years gets reopened and investigated properly. No exceptions. Sir, that's thousands of complaints. It will take months. Then it takes months. And Jennifer? Ground every Sky High Airlines flight. Nationwide. Right now. There was silence on the phone. Sir, ground the entire airline? That's over 300 flights a day. Thousands of passengers. I don't care. Ground them all until we finish the investigation. If we have pilots like Sanders flying our planes, then no one flies until we know every passenger is safe and will be treated with respect. But sir, the losses, the company will lose millions. I have millions. What I don't have is my daughter's trust right now. What I don't have is the trust of every passenger who's ever been treated like they don't matter. Money I can make back? Trust? That's harder to earn. Ground the flights. All of them. Michael hung up the phone. Across the country, in airports from New York to Los Angeles, from Miami to Seattle, Sky High Airlines flights started getting canceled. Pilots received emergency notifications. Passengers crowded around gate agents demanding answers. News reporters started making calls, trying to figure out what was happening. And in a small conference room at Baltimore Washington International Airport, Michael Morgan walked back to the lounge where his daughter waited. Grace looked up when he entered. Daddy? What's going on? People are saying all the Sky High flights are canceled. Is that true? Michael sat down next to his daughter and took her hand. Yes, baby girl. It's true. But, why? Because of me. No, Grace. Not because of you. Because of them. Because they forgot that every single person who buys a ticket deserves respect. They forgot that their job is to make people feel safe, not scared. They forgot that it doesn't matter what someone looks like or where they come from, everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. Grace's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were different tears. Daddy, did you really ground an entire airline just because of what happened to me? I grounded an entire airline because what happened to you has been happening to other people for years, and nobody with the power to stop it was paying attention. Until now. Grace threw her arms around her father and cried. But this time, they weren't tears of shame or embarrassment. They were tears of relief. Because for the first time since she'd been thrown off that plane, Grace felt like someone had told her what she already knew in her heart. What happened to her was wrong. And wrong things should never be ignored just because they happen to people who don't have power. Outside the conference room, airport workers whispered to each other. News vans were already pulling up to the terminal. This story was about to explode. But Michael Morgan didn't care about any of that. He just held his daughter and let her cry. And somewhere in the airport, being escorted out by security with his career in ruins, Kyle Sanders finally understood the lesson he should have learned years ago. Every person matters. Every single person. No matter what they look like. No matter who their parents are. Everyone. If you believe every company should be held accountable like this chapter right now. Show that you stand for justice. Subscribe if you think more CEOs should protect all their customers, not just the powerful ones. We need to support businesses that do the right thing. Share this story with someone who needs to see it. Someone who's been treated unfairly. Someone who needs to know they're not alone. Comment below, what would you do if you were Michael Morgan? Was he right to ground the entire airline? Let's discuss. By the next morning, the entire country knew Grace Morgan's name. It started with one passenger from Flight 447 who recorded everything on their phone. The video showed Kyle Sanders pointing at Grace, yelling at her to get off the plane. It showed Grace's face, scared, confused, trying not to cry. It showed 200 passengers sitting silently, doing nothing. The passenger posted the video on social media at 11 p.m. By midnight, it had 1 million views. By 6 a.m., it had 20 million views. By 8 a.m., every news channel in America was talking about it. Grace woke up in her bedroom at home and checked her phone. She had 847 notifications. Her hands shook as she scrolled through them. Messages from friends, OMG Grace, is this really you? Messages from strangers, you are so brave. Messages from news reporters, we'd like to interview you about what happened. Grace walked downstairs. Her father sat at the kitchen table, still wearing yesterday's clothes. He hadn't slept. His laptop was open, and he was on his 5th cup of coffee. Daddy? Grace said quietly. The video is everywhere. Michael looked up at his daughter. His eyes were tired, but they were also fierce. I know, baby girl. Come here. Grace sat next to him. On his laptop screen was a news article with the headline, CEO grounds entire airline after pilot kicks out his daughter. People are saying you only did this because I'm your daughter, Grace said softly. They're saying if I was just a regular kid, nobody would care. Michael closed the laptop and turned to face Grace. You're right. Some people are saying that. And you know what? They might have a point. Grace looked surprised. What? If you weren't my daughter, would I have known this happened? Probably not. Would Kyle Sanders have been fired so quickly? Maybe not. And that's the problem, Grace. That's exactly the problem. I don't understand. Michael took his daughter's hand. There are thousands of people who get treated badly every single day. On airplanes, in stores, at schools, everywhere. Most of them don't have fathers who own companies. Most of them can't make one phone call and change everything. So what happens to them? Nothing. They get hurt, they go home, they cry, and the person who hurt them goes on living their life like nothing happened. Grace's eyes filled with tears. That's not fair. No, it's not. So here's what I decided last night. I'm not just fixing this problem at Sky High Airlines. I'm making sure every airline we own treats passengers with respect. And I'm creating a hotline, a special phone number, where any passenger on any of our airlines can report if they're treated badly. And every single report will be investigated by people who work directly for me. Really? Really? Because you're right, Grace. It's not fair that things only changed because you're my daughter. So I'm going to use my power to help people who don't have power. That's what people with power should do. Grace hugged her father tight. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, baby girl. At Sky High Airlines headquarters in downtown Baltimore, it was chaos. David Fletcher, the vice president of flight operations, sat in his office with his head in his hands. His phone hadn't stopped ringing. Angry passengers. Angry board members. Angry employees who'd been sent home because all the flights were grounded. There was a knock on his door. Come in, David said weakly. Jennifer Park walked in, carrying a tablet and wearing an expression that said she meant business. Mr. Fletcher, I'm here on behalf of Mr. Morgan. We need to discuss the complaint reports you closed without investigation. David's face went pale. Those were handled according to company policy. Company policy? Jennifer's voice was ice cold. Company policy says you investigate complaints, not sweep them under the rug. We have 3 complaints against Kyle Sanders that you personally marked as closed without merit. All 3 passengers were people of color. Would you like to explain why you decided they had no merit without even interviewing the passengers? David stammered. Sanders had been with the company for 15 years. He was a good pilot. I didn't think. You didn't think? Or you didn't care? The room went silent. Jennifer continued. Mr. Morgan wants you in his office tomorrow at 9 a.m. I suggest you bring a good explanation. Because right now, it looks like you protected a pilot who was discriminating against passengers. And that makes you just as guilty as he is. David's career flashed before his eyes. Please, I have a family. So did the passengers you ignored. So does Grace Morgan. Somehow, their families didn't matter to you. Jennifer turned to leave. 9 a.m. tomorrow. Don't be late. She walked out, leaving David Fletcher sitting in his office, finally understanding that his actions, or lack of actions, had consequences. Across town, Kyle Sanders sat in his living room, watching the news destroy his reputation in real time. The pilot accused of discriminating against a teenage passenger. Shocking video shows Captain Sanders ordering the girl off the plane. Sources say Sanders has a history of complaints. His phone rang. It was his wife, calling from her sister's house. She'd left with the kids that morning. Kyle, her voice was cold. My sister just sent me the video. Tell me it's not true. Tell me you didn't do this. Kyle couldn't speak. I defended you, his wife shouted. When you came home yesterday saying you got fired for no reason, I defended you. I told everyone my husband would never do something like that. And now the whole world can see that you did. Honey, please. Don't, honey, me. That girl was 15 years old. She was someone's daughter. How could you? I made a mistake. A mistake? Kyle, this wasn't a mistake. This was who you are. And I don't think I know you anymore. The phone went dead. Kyle sat alone in his house, watching his life fall apart on TV. Back at the Morgan house, Grace's phone buzzed with a new message. It was from her best friend, Maya. Grace, you're on the news. Everyone at school is talking about it. Are you okay? Grace typed back, I'm okay. It's weird seeing myself on TV. But I think something good might come from this. Maya responded, you're the bravest person I know. What your dad did was amazing. My mom said she wishes more companies cared about people like that. Grace smiled. Then she had an idea. She walked back to the kitchen where her father was still working on his laptop. Daddy? Can I make a video? Michael looked up. What kind of video? I want to talk about what happened. On camera. For social media. Because people are talking about me anyway, so I should tell them how I really feel. In my own words. Michael studied his daughter's face. She looked scared, but also determined. Are you sure? Once you put it online, you can't take it back. I'm sure. Because if I don't say anything, people will make up what I'm thinking. And I want them to know the truth. Michael smiled, proud of his daughter's courage. Okay. Let's make a video. 20 minutes later, Grace sat in front of her father's phone camera. She took a deep breath. Hi. My name is Grace Morgan. By now, you've probably seen the video of me getting kicked off Flight 447. I want to tell you what that felt like. Grace spoke from her heart. She talked about feeling scared. About feeling small. About wondering if she'd done something wrong. About watching 200 people stay silent while she was humiliated. But she also talked about hope. My dad taught me something yesterday. He said people with power should use it to help people who don't have power. And I think that's true. But I also think everyone has some kind of power. Even if you're not a CEO. Even if you're just a passenger on a plane. Grace looked directly at the camera. If you see someone being treated unfairly, say something. Do something. Don't just sit there and watch. Because your voice matters. Every voice matters. The video ended. Michael posted it on Grace's social media account. Within 1 hour, it had 5 million views. Within 3 hours, #EveryVoiceMatters was trending worldwide. And in living rooms across America, people watched a 15-year-old girl teach them a lesson that adults had forgotten. Silence helps the bully, not the victim. Grace Morgan had found her voice. And now, millions of people were ready to listen. 3 days after Grace's video went viral, something unexpected started happening. Passengers from all over the country began calling the new hotline Michael had created. The phone lines were flooded. Hundreds of people, then thousands, sharing their own stories of being treated badly on airplanes. Jennifer Park walked into Michael's office with a thick folder of reports. Her face was serious. Sir, you need to see these. Michael looked up from his desk. He'd barely slept in 3 days. How many calls? 4,216. And sir, it's not just about Sky High Airlines. People are reporting problems with other airlines too. Airlines we don't even own. Michael leaned back in his chair. Tell me what they're saying. Jennifer opened the folder. A woman named Patricia Lewis says she was flying to her mother's funeral. The flight attendant told her she was too large for one seat and humiliated her in front of everyone, demanding she buy a second ticket or leave the plane. She missed her mother's funeral. Michael's jaw tightened. Next one. A man named James Chen says security pulled him out of line at the airport and searched his bags 3 times because he looked suspicious. He's a doctor. He was wearing his hospital badge. They made him miss his flight to a medical conference where he was supposed to give a speech. Next. A teenage boy named Marcus. Jennifer paused. Actually, sir, there are 47 stories just like Grace's. Teenage passengers removed from flights 4 acting suspicious when they were just sitting quietly. Almost all of them were black or Hispanic. Michael stood up and walked to his window. Below him, the city of Baltimore went about its normal day. But nothing felt normal anymore. How many pilots are we investigating? At Sky High? 23 pilots have been suspended pending investigation. 17 flight attendants. And 9 managers who closed complaints without proper review. And David Fletcher? Jennifer's expression hardened. He's being sued. 3 passengers whose complaints he ignored are taking him to court. He resigned yesterday. Michael nodded slowly. Good. What about Kyle Sanders? He's been on the news trying to apologize. He did an interview saying he made a terrible mistake and he's not a racist. But sir, nobody's buying it. His own family won't even speak to him. His wife filed for divorce. Michael felt no satisfaction hearing that. He didn't want to destroy Kyle Sanders' life. He just wanted to make sure Sanders never had the power to hurt anyone again. What about the other airlines? Michael asked. The ones we don't own? That's the interesting part, sir. 5 major airlines called yesterday. They want to meet with you. They want to know how you're implementing changes, because their passengers are demanding the same thing. Michael turned from the window. They're scared. Yes, sir. They're terrified. Because Grace's video didn't just expose one pilot or one airline. It exposed an entire system that's been ignoring passengers for years. And now people are angry. That afternoon, Grace sat in her school cafeteria with her friends. Everyone wanted to talk about what happened. You're famous. Maya said, showing Grace her phone. Look, you have 2 million followers now. Grace felt uncomfortable. I don't want to be famous. I just wanted people to know what happened. Her friend Devin, a tall boy from her math class, spoke up. My uncle saw your video. He started crying. Everyone got quiet. Why? Grace asked softly. Because 15 years ago, he got kicked off a flight too. Same thing as you. The pilot said he looked threatening. My uncle was 20 years old, wearing a suit, going to a job interview. They made him leave. He never told anyone because he was ashamed. He thought it was his fault. Devin's voice cracked. But after he saw your video, he called that hotline your dad made. He reported what happened to him. And you know what? The airline apologized. After 15 years, they finally said, "We're sorry." Grace's eyes filled with tears. Really? Really? Your video made him realize it wasn't his fault. And Grace, if your dad hadn't done what he did, my uncle would have spent the rest of his life thinking he deserved to be treated that way. Around the cafeteria table, other students nodded. Some wiped their eyes. Maya squeezed Grace's hand. You started something important. Don't feel bad about being famous. Feel proud. That evening, Michael Morgan appeared on national television for an interview. It was the first time he'd spoken publicly since grounding Sky High Airlines. The interviewer, a woman named Susan Wright, didn't waste time with easy questions. Mr. Morgan, critics say you only care about discrimination now because it affected your daughter. They say if Grace wasn't involved, you would have ignored this problem like every other CEO. What do you say to that? Michael looked directly at the camera. They're absolutely right. Susan blinked, surprised. You agree? Yes. I was ignorant. I built a company worth billions of dollars, and I didn't pay attention to how passengers were being treated. I should have. That's my failure. But I can't change the past. I can only change what happens next. So what happens next? Every airline we own now has mandatory training for all employees. Real training, not just watching a video. They'll learn about bias, discrimination, and how their words and actions affect passengers. Anyone who refuses the training will be fired. That seems extreme. Is it? Michael's voice was sharp. Is it extreme to expect people who work with the public to treat everyone with respect? I don't think so. Susan leaned forward. You've lost over $40 million by grounding flights and doing these investigations. Your board of directors must be furious. Some of them are. 3 board members resigned. They thought I was being too emotional and bad for business. Michael smiled coldly. I replaced them with people who understand that treating humans like humans is good business. What about Kyle Sanders? He says you destroyed his life over one mistake. Michael's expression hardened. Kyle Sanders destroyed his own life by abusing his power for years. I just made sure he couldn't hurt anyone else. And Susan, let me be clear, this wasn't one mistake. We found 9 other incidents where Sanders treated passengers badly. 9. The only mistake was that nobody stopped him sooner. Including you? Including me. Yes. The interview continued, but across America, people watching had already made up their minds. Social media exploded with opinions. Hashtag I stand with Grace trended worldwide. But so did hashtag Morgan goes too far. Some people praised Michael for taking action. Others said he was grandstanding and using his daughter's pain for publicity. The truth, as always, was complicated. Late that night, Grace couldn't sleep. She went downstairs and found her father in his study, working as always. Daddy? Michael looked up. Hey, baby girl. Can't sleep? People are saying mean things about you online. They're saying you only did this to look good. Michael patted the chair next to him. Grace sat down. Let me tell you something, Grace. When you do the right thing, not everyone will agree with you. Some people will say you're doing too much. Some will say you're not doing enough. Some will say you have bad motives. Does that make you sad? Sometimes. But then I think about your face when Kyle Sanders kicked you off that plane. I think about Devin's uncle crying because he finally got an apology after 15 years. I think about all those people who called the hotline, finally feeling like someone cares. Michael took Grace's hand. And I realize that the people who are angry at me? They're not the people I'm trying to help. I can't make everyone happy. But I can make sure that people who fly on our airlines feel safe and respected. That's enough for me. Grace hugged her father. I'm proud of you, Daddy. I'm proud of you too, Grace. You showed more courage in one day than most people show in their entire lives. Outside, news vans still sat parked near their house, waiting for the next development in the story. But inside, a father and daughter sat together in the quiet, knowing that whatever happened next, they'd face it together. And sometimes, that's all the strength you need. 6 months later. Grace Morgan stood in the Baltimore-Washington International Airport, looking at Gate B-17. The same gate where everything had happened. The same place where her life changed forever. But today was different. Today, she was here by choice. You ready, baby girl? Michael asked, standing beside her. Grace took a deep breath. I think so. They walked through the terminal together. Passengers recognized them, some smiled, some waved, some came up to shake Michael's hand and thank him. Mr. Morgan, my daughter flies alone to visit her grandmother now, and she feels safe because of what you did, one woman said, tears in her eyes. Thank you for giving my son his dignity back, a man told him, referring to a complaint that had finally been investigated properly. Grace and her father made their way to a special area of the airport that had been closed off for a private event. Inside were 100 people, passengers who had called the hotline, employees who had been part of the changes, and news reporters covering the story. At the front of the room stood a wall with photographs. Faces of people from all backgrounds, all ages, all races. Underneath was a plaque that read, "Every voice matters," in memory of every passenger who was silenced. Never again. Michael walked to the microphone. The room went quiet. 6 months ago, my daughter taught me something I should have known all along. She taught me that power means nothing if you don't use it to protect people who can't protect themselves. He paused, looking at Grace with pride. Today, I'm announcing that Trans Global Holdings is creating the Grace Morgan Foundation. This foundation will help passengers who face discrimination on any airline, not just ours. We'll provide free legal help, counseling, and support. Because what happened to Grace shouldn't happen to anyone. Ever. The room erupted in applause. But Michael wasn't finished. I'm also announcing my retirement as CEO of Trans Global Holdings. The room went silent. Grace's eyes went wide. Daddy? Michael smiled at his daughter. I've spent 30 years building a business. I forgot to build something more important, a world where my daughter can travel safely. So I'm stepping down to run the foundation full-time. Because making money is easy. Making change? That's harder. That's more important. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. But Michael only looked at Grace. I can't give you back the day you were humiliated. I can't erase that pain. But I can make sure your pain meant something. I can make sure it changed things. Grace walked to her father and hugged him tight. The cameras captured it, a father and daughter, holding each other while the world watched. After the ceremony, Grace did something she'd been planning for weeks. She walked to gate B-17 and sat in the waiting area. Passengers came and went, not knowing this was the gate, the place where it all started. A young black boy, maybe 10 years old, sat near her with his mother. He wore a backpack covered in superhero stickers. He looked nervous. First time flying? Grace asked gently. The boy nodded. I'm scared. Why? My friend told me airplanes don't like kids who look like us. He said we have to be extra good or they'll kick us off. Grace's heart broke. Even after everything, children still carried this fear. She knelt down next to the boy. What's your name? Marcus. Marcus, I'm Grace. And I want to tell you something very important. You don't have to be extra good. You just have to be yourself. And if anyone, treats you badly on that airplane, you tell your mom. And your mom will call a special number, and people will help you. Okay? Marcus looked at his mother, who was crying quietly. Is that true, Mama? Marcus asked. His mother nodded. Yes, baby. Things are different now. You're safe. Marcus smiled, a big, beautiful smile. Okay. I'm not scared anymore. As Marcus and his mother boarded their flight, Grace felt something she hadn't felt in months. Peace. That evening, Grace posted one final video on social media. Hi, everyone. It's Grace Morgan. 6 months ago, I was kicked off a plane. That video changed my life. But I want you to know something important. I'm not special. I'm not a hero. I'm just a girl who got treated badly and had a father who could do something about it. She paused, choosing her words carefully. But there are millions of people who get treated badly every day, and they don't have a CEO father. They don't go viral. They don't get justice. So this is my challenge to you, be someone's CEO. Be someone's protector. If you see something wrong, say something. Do something. Use whatever power you have, even if it's just your voice, to stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. Grace smiled at the camera. My dad taught me that power isn't about how much money you have or how important your job is. Power is about what you do when you see someone hurting. Power is about choosing to care when it would be easier not to. She held up a card with the foundation's hotline number. If you've been discriminated against while traveling, call this number. You matter. Your story matters. And you're not alone anymore. The video ended. Within hours, it had 10 million views. The foundation received 3,000 calls in one day. And across the country, in airports and airplanes, on buses and trains, people started paying attention. Started speaking up. Started remembering that every person, regardless of what they look like or where they come from, deserves respect. 1 year later, Kyle Sanders sat in a small apartment, watching the news. Sky-High Airlines had become the safest, most passenger-friendly airline in America. Other airlines had followed their example. Laws had been passed protecting passengers from discrimination. And it all started because he made one terrible choice. Kyle had lost everything: his job, his family, his reputation. But slowly, painfully, he'd started to understand why. He picked up his phone and did something he'd been too proud to do before. He enrolled in a community course about bias and discrimination. Not because anyone forced him, but because he finally understood that he needed to change. It was too late to fix what he'd broken. But maybe, just maybe, he could make sure he never hurt anyone again. Grace Morgan graduated high school 3 years later at the top of her class. She gave a speech about justice, courage, and the power of speaking up. She went to college to study civil rights law. And every time she flew, which was often, she made sure to smile at every passenger around her, especially the kids who looked nervous. Because Grace Morgan understood something that changed the world. One voice can start a movement. One act of courage can inspire millions. And one father's love for his daughter can ground an airline and lift up an entire nation. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you that your voice matters, hit that like button. Subscribe because stories like this need to be told, and changemakers like Grace and Michael need to be celebrated. Share this story with everyone. With your family, your friends, your coworkers. Because the lesson here isn't just about airlines, it's about standing up whenever you see injustice. Comment with one promise. What will you do the next time you see someone being treated unfairly? Make that promise public. Make yourself accountable. Remember, silence protects the bully. Your voice protects the victim. Choose wisely.